Okay, so I just got done watching the first episode of The Office, the pilot, the number one episode of the first season, first episode ever, whatever you want to call it. Now, here's the thing one caveat that I just have to put out there. Uh, I usually hate the pilot episode of any TV show. There's tons of TV shows that I love. I've watched entire seasons of Game of Thrones, House, like I mentioned before, Sopranos, Breaking Bad. There's dozens and dozens of shows that I've seen start to finish, from the first episode to the last. And usually, I'm not a big fan of the pilot. It takes a little while to get to know the characters and to get to know the plot and to figure out where this whole thing's going. And I hate the first episode of almost any show, just simply because there's usually a lot of posturing where they're trying to really explain who everybody is, and the writing for a pilot is like trying to set a stage that they're going to follow later. There's a few shows that are a big exception. And the interesting thing about The Office is I think they've done a pretty good job. I didn't hate it. Normally I hate the pilot. I didn't hate this pilot. It was pretty good. I felt like they were just basically diving right in and getting started with the show with no pretense or bullshit. I don't know why there's a camera crew following around people at Dunder Mifflin, and I don't really care. I mean, I do care on some level. I'm kind of curious why they, whoever is on the other side of that camera, why are they there? How did they go through the process of being invited, or why did Michael Scott and the rest of the gang agree to it? How the hell did they get the company to approve this project? What little I know about the characters already, I'm guessing nobody told corporate that there's a camera crew following people around. Maybe later in the show they explain it. I don't know if it's a university class that's doing some type of project, some independent filmmaker, somebody like me who's studying the organization maybe and going to do this. Maybe this is at the request of corporate, the behest of corporate, that they maybe hired these folks to come in and evaluate the situation. Michael Scott at one point says that they've increased sales 17%. It's interesting because an outfit that's supposedly doing so well is having to go through this downsizing exercise that they talk about in the first episode. But maybe the camera crew there is to figure out what's the secret to his success. I don't know. I really don't. But here's the interesting thing. I don't hate it. I'm intrigued. I get it, guys. Okay, so everybody watches The Office. I'm the only one that hasn't. I see how you could get hooked, right? Because there's a lot of little things going on that capture your attention. And I'm curious to see where this goes. I really am. Like, I could imagine, 10, 15 years ago, this show comes on television. It's not like anything else that was on back then. And really being captivated and saying, I wonder where this is going. I'm going to tune in next week. So I'm going to tune in tomorrow and check out the second episode. So we'll see how that goes. I have a notebook, so I'm taking notes and some things that I observed, I guess, that I'll just share with you guys. Obviously, like, so much of what Michael Scott is doing is cringeworthy. He's just sort of, I think everybody has worked with someone like him at some point, but they're not always in a position of leadership, and it's interesting at the end of the show. I think at the very end of the first episode, he says, like, to him, there's like 3 important elements to being a good manager or leader. And for him, it was like, number 1, you got to be everybody's friend. That sort of like goes against all the textbook guidance that there is out there, right? Like, and then 2, to be their quote unquote boss. So I'm going to be your friend, I'm going to be your boss. And then the third thing that he said that I thought was funny was that kind of an entertainer. And yet, all through the episode, it's like all he wants to be is an entertainer. He's cracking jokes, he's making like really bad accents that are in poor taste, often marginalizing minorities, which is already bad precedent for the first episode. I can't imagine where this is going. But he does so many things that he's clearly, maybe to him it's being a friend, but really he wants the attention right? He's just all about that and pleasing people and having fun, whatever his version of that is. And I guess I'm curious to see how that pans out, because in my real world experience, people that kind of exhibit those characteristics aren't necessarily the best leaders. They're not the best corporate citizens. It's difficult for a lot of people who want to be friends and have fun at work to actually lead people towards success, especially if that success is something that's like clearly measured by clearly defined corporate guidelines. Because these, you can tell already in the first episode, he's not the type of person that likes to go between the lines. He gets the facts from corporate that's actually telling him that he's about to have a corporate visitor and they're going to do downsizing and have a conversation about that. He doesn't even read it. He sticks it right in the shredder. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with here, right? And then unfortunately that puts the rest of his team behind the eight ball because they don't have all the information that they need, and he kind of bullshits his way through it. At the end of the day, it doesn't look like he's getting fired anytime soon, so I'm curious to see where that goes. A couple of other things that I noticed that are interesting. So like now I'm starting to get to know the names of people. So Dwight and Jim, I don't know what their backstory is. And again, that's the other thing that's nice about this pilot, is that you don't need to have all this character backstory. Tell me who these characters are by the way they interact with each other, and then sprinkle in some history. And I hope that they do sprinkle in some history later. But for now, I get it. These guys are I don't know if they're rivals, as much as they just really don't like each other. And they're always trying to up the ante and the pranks and stuff like that. So Jim seems like he's just trying to get through the day, try to get the job done, and he doesn't love his job, so he's just a regular guy, I guess. And then Dwight is Dwight. I don't know Dwight, right? It's a character I've seen all of 20 minutes on screen, and he reminds me of a lot of employees that I've encountered over the years, that maybe in their personal life they don't have a lot of control over their situation. They don't have a lot of power, and frankly, they don't really have it at work either. And you can see with Dwight, he doesn't have a lot of control over his situation. Oh, but man, does he try every little inch he can get of quote unquote power or control over a situation. He's trying to leverage it to the max. And I get it. I can start to see why this show is so popular, because everybody knows somebody like him. Everybody knows somebody like Michael Scott. Everybody knows somebody like Dwight. Jim, I think he's like a lot of people in general. So probably there's a lot of people relating to him. I'm curious to see who the rest of the characters are. And it's funny because Jim, the other character I noticed in the show in the first episode was Pam, right? So she's the subject of teasing by Michael Scott, which isn't fun. She's an interesting character as well. But one of the things that I thought was really fascinating is there's a little bit of this like romantic flirtation thing going on. So, Jim seems like he's spending a lot of time at Pam's desk trying to, garner her affection, if you will. And hilarious. I love this part of the show is hilarious when her fiance comes in, Roy, and it's like, oh wow, okay, so Jim's barking up the wrong tree. He's one of those guys. But then the interesting thing about this is that Roy, actually, he's some kind of blue collar worker, literally wearing a navy blue jacket, a delivery guy, I guess. And right here, Dunder Mifflin. So he works for the company too. So somehow Pam is engaged to another Dunder Mifflin employee, and maybe Jim thinks that he does have a chance with her because she's dated coworkers before. I don't know. I'm curious to see what that's all about. Let's see if I've got anything in the notes. Oh yeah, from like an HR perspective, this is going to be a little bit different than maybe what you were expecting, but I sort of have an appreciation for how Dwight and Jim work to resolve their differences. Faulty as it might be, as politically incorrect, I don't even know if that's the right word, but inappropriate, maybe immature in the way that they decide to do things, like putting Dwight Stapler in a bowl of Jello, or arming your defenses on your desk with like these sharpened pencils and all this sort of obnoxious stuff. From an HR perspective, they seem like it's in good nature. Nobody's getting hurt, and they're working it out. I know that it seems counterintuitive, but they're working out their differences, and they're not dragging other people into it. Maybe that changes later, but right now, I'm glad that we've got two, albeit immature, adults solving their own interpersonal problems. At least that's what it looks like to me. And let's see. That's about it. The irony is not lost that they hired a brand new temp on the first day of the first episode anyway, and on his first day, the company's going through this downsizing exercise. So there's some irony there. Anyway, first impressions, seems like a cool show, and can't wait to see episode number 2.